In 1985, director Stuart Gordon made a small cult movie based on an H.P. Lovecraft story about a deranged medical student who concocted a chemical reagent which could reanimate dead bodies. A few years later, in 1992, Hollywood filmmaker Robert Zimeckis followed up the huge success he had had previously with Who Framed Roger Rabbit and the Back to the Future trilogy with a dark, twisted B-movie about a magical serum that brings two bitter, middle-aged women back from the dead. Both movies were filled with hilarious but hideous scenes of body horror, one made with stunning practical effects and the other with groundbreaking CGI. And both movies portrayed the moral, spiritual and ethical consequences of bringing dead people back to life in the most creative but grotesque ways imaginable. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of the zombie movie, and we look at Robert Zemeckis' Death Becomes Her and Stuart Gordon's Re-Animator.
I will not speak to you till you put your head on straight.
Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres across several weeks. We are currently in the middle of exploring the evolution of the zombie movie, and this is part 12, in which, as the intro suggested, we're going to be looking at these two really fun movies about magical elixirs that bring people back from the dead. Yes, that is Re-Animator from 1984 and Death Becomes Her from 1992. Both movies will be explored in spoilerific detail, and just as an aside, just as an extra warning, we also talk a little bit about Stuart Gordon's follow-up movie From Beyond. Now, we don't really talk about this in spoilerific detail, but just beware, if you haven't seen that, there will be minor plot points given away from that movie as well. I've got a very exciting episode planned for you this week, because a little bit later on in this episode, I will be speaking to none other than horror royalty Barbara Crampton. We will be talking about her new movie, Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, but I also, of course, get the chance to chat to her about her career, about some of her early movies, one of which, of course, being Stuart Gordon's Re-Animator. How perfect is that? So we've got all of that to come later on in the episode. But first of all, joining me to discuss these two movies in depth, someone who has been on the podcast a couple of times before. I love having him back. I'm a huge fan of his. He is an actor. He's currently starring in one of the biggest shows on the West End right now. It is my great pleasure to welcome back to the podcast, Stevie Webb.
I'm back.
Hello. You are back. How are things?
Awesome. Thank you, mate.
Love it. Love that you've got a G&T for this chat.
Oh, absolutely.
Brilliant.
I thought, do you know what?
Yeah.
I keep, the last 2 times I've had my bottle of water.
Yeah.
And that's great, for hydration.
Professional.
But fuck it, why not have a gin?
Especially these films.
Sunday.
Quite fun what we're about to talk about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I work Monday to Saturday, so if there's only one day I can have a drink, so I'm having one.
So we are talking about zombies this time round. What are your thoughts on this subgenre of zombie movies?
Yeah. Well, I like. Obviously, it's a subgenre that has its own subgenres, so it's quite hard to pinpoint. Viral zombies definitely scare me more.
Yes.
I think, just because I think that's because it's fraught and panicky.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. There's so many different facets to it.
Yeah, you're right. There's like subgenres within zombies.
Yeah,
almost,
and there
isn't
isn't a subgenre that I dislike.
Yeah. Do you like the kind of the classics, Night of the Living Dead, Romero movies,
Totally,
those types?
absolutely,
yeah.
and that's because my parents. I don't know why. Both my mum and my dad say the scariest things for them are zombies, and obviously the old school ones. My dad always says it's because when he was a kid, the horror films that he saw were Frankenstein and The Mummy and stuff like that, and that slow approaching doom walking towards you, and I think that's sort of why that's stuck in his head, and so zombies have always scared my parents.
Interesting. Yeah, do they scare you?
Yeah, they do because of the pack. Because when they come in a pack, it's like an army. And also, what is more terrifying than an enemy that has no emotions or empathy?
Yes.
Just their only goal is to get to your brain for lunch.
Yes.
And that's just the most horrific thing.
Yeah. And it's that idea, isn't it, of like you say, this horde of them, they just keep coming and keep coming. And they're even scarier when they run as well. That's terrifying.
Like, fuck that.
Yeah, what would you do? What do you have a zombie apocalypse plan, Stevie? What would you do? Where would you go?
Well, there's all the obvious things like get in the sewer or get to the top of a building, but then every time you think that, a film comes out and it completely discredits that. It proves it wrong completely, and you're fucked. So I say take to the sea.
Take to the sea. Good. Just get on a boat.
Yeah.
And just
get some supplies. Get on a boat.
Interesting.
And then wait until swimming zombies evolve.
Oh my god, yeah, and just hope that you do get rescued or something before you run out of food and water. Good, amazing. And I think, just briefly as well, I think we're going to talk, the stuff we're talking about this week is kind of more, they are zombies, but they're slightly off from regular zombies, and there's a bit of body horror and that kind of thing as well,
absolutely.
Isn't there? Are you a fan of like that kind of stuff, body horror and that kind of thing?
Blood and guts and gore, I'll never put my hands over my face or a scary monster, but body horror does tend to make me squint my eyes a bit. I think I don't like being shown that my body is this weak, sensitive vessel.
Yes, right.
Basically, and literally a bag of bones.
Yeah.
And the thing that's scary about zombies in that way is they show you that your body is literally just a vehicle to transport it to lunch.
Totally. Yeah, you're so right.
So body horror, it does really, it makes my skin crawl. And but again, it's not that I'm scared.
No.
But it disturbs me, definitely.
Totally, I'm right there with you. I can handle any amount of like elaborate blood and guts, but yeah, like skin being peeled or
that sort of
all
shit.
of that kind of Cronenberg-y stuff as well is quite horrible. Yeah,
and actually bones protruding. Like if you see something break, like the scene in The Fly, the arm wrestle.
Yes,
is that in The Fly? Yes. The arm wrestle, and when he snaps his wrist, it just
Yeah. Agreed. And actually, there are a couple of moments in Death Becomes Her, which we'll talk about, and it is obviously funny, but also I was a little bit like, because of the neck bones and that kind of thing.
And the doctor, when she's with the doctor, that's my favourite scene.
Yes, amazing, absolutely amazing. Cool. So let's get into it. We're going to kick off then with Re-Animator.
Herbert West is at the top of his class in medical school.
How can you teach such drivel? These people are here to learn, and you're closing their minds before they even have a chance.
He's brilliant, but a little weird.
I've broken the 6 to 12 minute barrier. I've conquered brain death.
His experiments have always been unorthodox.
It was dead.
But lately they're getting out of hand. And he's just made a discovery that could wake up the dead.
Herbert West has affected reanimation in dead animal tissue.
What are you thinking? How do you feel?
So basically, we have this intense medical student called Herbert West, and he relocates from studying with a prolific doctor in Switzerland to Miskatonic College in Chicago. There he's studying under this guy called Dr. Hall, whose theories about the length of time that the brain can remain alive or active post-mortem really rile Herbert. So he shacks up with two other students who are these lovebirds, Meg and Dan. And basically their cat goes missing, and Meg finds the cat in Herbert's fridge, and it's dead. And then later that night, Dan hears this commotion in the basement, and he goes down and he sees that the cat has been brought back to life. So our story starts.
Yes.
So then he obviously believes he's found the answer to bringing back the brain function after death with this reagent elixir, which we never get told what is in it or how he created it, but it doesn't matter. That is completely irrelevant.
In fact, both movies, these elixirs that are
that's true.
They just are what they are.
They just are.
Yeah,
Don't question it.
Glowy
it does
liquids.
what it does.
Yeah.
Herbert wants to try it on a human subject, and so they reanimate a corpse from the morgue, and it all goes horribly wrong, and then basically that's the rest of the film. Just
so good.
This battle between reanimated corpses and our Scooby gang.
Headless corpses and all sorts. I mean, so what do you think of this movie? Are you a fan?
I mean, it's a lot more fun than I actually remember. I don't love it.
It's really fun though, isn't it?
It's
really
so
fun.
much fun. It's really enjoyable in its absurdity, I guess, and that's refreshing. I mean, and around that time, there's quite a few of these horror comedies coming out, like Ghoulies and the House series and stuff. But I think Re-Animator is definitely at the top of those.
I think it is, and we'll get into all of it. But I think partly it's Stuart Gordon's direction and it's the style. It looks really cool, doesn't it? I love the colours and the body horror aspect and the practical effects. I think it still really holds up, right? Sort of 35 years later.
Completely, and it's in the best possible way. It's sort of laughable as well. Like you giggle,
massively,
like when the cat's being reanimated. It's hilarious.
Yes.
And and you know, it's sent up, and obviously this is post-American Werewolf, so effects-wise, it's you know, it's inferior, but it's the crudeness of the practical effect in this that is just
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely.
That I really enjoy, and that makes it titillating. You know, they've just pumped latex full of blood. I read 24 gallons of blood in this film they used.
Amazing.
Which is fantastic.
I loved it as well. I'm a big fan. Like you say, it's not one of my favourites, and it's not one that I choose to watch a lot, to be honest. I think this is only the second time I'd ever seen it. But it's like there are loads of individual elements about it that I really admire and appreciate.
Me too. And actually, so inventive, the different ways that they create the head and the body, whether it's being carried or... it's brilliant. You can obviously work out what's going on, but they came up with so many different ways to do it. Yeah. And there's that wonderful comedy scene where it's wearing the anatomic sort of doctor's skull with half a face on it and the trench coat, pretending like you know, in films when 3 kids are under a trench coat. It's that sort of comedy.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is brilliant. And actually, some of the gore, because it is essentially... It's more comedy than horror, I would argue. I mean, do you think that's the case? Yeah.
Definitely. And it's more to gross you out as well.
It's more to gross you out. And there is some proper grossness, especially at the beginning when he's teaching the class and he peels the skin off the skull.
That's
you know,
and he's like, it's like just like peeling an orange. It's
so gross.
It's horrible.
Amazing. And obviously, like, we need to talk about Jeffrey Combs as as Herbert West in this, because it kind of... he carries it, really, doesn't he? It kind of rests on him and his performance. Do you think he does a good job?
I do. I really. I think he's such a good character. Do you know what? Actually, I hate that term. I think he's such a good actor, not a character actor.
I've never really understood what character actor means.
It's derogatory. It's totally derogatory. It's basically saying you could never be a leading man serious actor.
Right,
but you're very good at those quirky roles.
Yes.
Fuck you.
Yeah, that's really weird, isn't it?
It's harder to do.
Surely that's the harder
role.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't fucking demean it by saying that. So scrap that. I think he's a brilliant actor.
He is.
It's his mix of the intensity and also his lightheartedness. He's really charming in it.
Yes.
And he sort of reminds me of a mix of Rick Moranis and Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory. He's got
that. And I got a real Crispin Glover vibe, George McFly. You know,
totally,
like that kind of a quirkiness as well.
Yeah. I know your work, Dr. Hill, quite well. Your theory on the location of the will in the brain is interesting. Though derivative of Dr. Gruber's research in the early 70s. So derivative, in fact, that in Europe it's considered plagiarized. And your support of the 12-minute limit on the life of the brainstem after death.
6 to 12 minutes, Mr.
West. Herbert West.
Again, we see him murder people and all sorts. And, you know, but he's kind of the hero, right? I mean, you don't dislike him.
Yeah, he's an anti-hero.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is my favourite. Anti-anything, actually, is my favourite. Yeah, you're totally on his side, and that's why you don't bat an eyelid, because the bad guy gets his head chopped off with a shovel, and you're like, yeah, good for you.
Good for you.
Yeah,
brilliant. I love how matter of fact he is when he says something. What does he say? He's like, "Cat's dead. Ask questions later."
That's it. Yeah, when they're complaining, why didn't you tell us the cat's dead? He said, "Oh, what would I do? Leave a note."
Yeah,
cat's dead. More later.
Yeah, so good.
He knocked the garbage over, and he got its head stuck in a jar. You weren't home, so I put it in there. I certainly didn't think you'd want to find it like that. I did not want to stink the place up. I was going to show you.
You couldn't call or write a note.
I was busy pushing bodies around, as you well know. And what would a note say, Dan? Cat dead, details later.
So good. And what about the other two? So we've got Bruce Abbott, who plays Dan, and the brilliant Barbara Crampton, who plays Megan. I love Barbara Crampton.
Well, I mean, she can do no wrong in my eyes. I feel like I grew up with her.
She's probably got this reputation as being this kind of horror character actress, quote unquote. And she's a really good actor, I think, as well.
Completely.
Understated.
I think in this, unfortunately, she is pushed into that 80s, the 80s girl in distress who doesn't really have a shining moment much. She gets saved a lot.
Yes.
But yeah, Barbara Crampton, she's such a champion for the genre as well. But her later stuff, when she gets those meaty roles like Beyond the Gates, even Puppet Master, Littlest Reich.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, she is good. And you're right, she doesn't have a whole lot to do in this film, but you can still see that what she does is good. I think, you know, understated and good and interesting. Yeah.
And she plays it for real. Actually, I think in this, she actually plays it 100% for real.
She does. She plays it straight, doesn't she?
Totally.
Well, I suppose you kind of need that. You need those characters to balance Herbert West a bit, don't you? Like, you need those other two to be like,
because he's so
what the fuck is going on with this guy? Kind of thing. Yeah, it's really good.
Dan, fine.
Yeah, he's fine, isn't he? He does the job.
It's the straight man.
He does the job, exactly. He's the straight man, yeah. There are elements of this film that are a little bit like, have maybe dated badly in terms of. I mean, how do you find that scene towards the end when she is sexually assaulted by the head? I mean,
I hate it.
It's horrible, isn't it?
I hate it.
And again, it's kind of uncomfortable because it's supposed to be kind of really funny as well.
Yeah.
And it's so absurd, but also it's kind of there's something really leery about it. And I guess it's supposed to be, but it is.
Yeah, but it's not. I mean, it's meant to be funny that she's stripped naked and lying on basically a gurney, and this disembodied head is being led by the body's hands between her legs and licking her.
And it just goes on. Like, you think it's going to stop or they're going to cut, and it just keeps going, doesn't it? It's really gross and uncomfortable. I hated it, if I'm honest. Yeah.
I really did. I couldn't really watch that.
Yeah.
It upset me.
No, I get what you mean. It's really... and just a horrible thing for Barbara Crampton to have had to have done as well. Because,
I mean, she... in her early years, she had to do quite a few things.
She did.
Admired your beauty, my dear. I think I've always loved you.
So we should probably talk about this is it's based on an H.P. Lovecraft story, and we've sort of mentioned Lovecraft a couple of times on this podcast, but we've never really sort of talked about him and who he was and what we mean, I suppose, when we say Lovecraftian. So just sort of briefly, I know neither of us are kind of Lovecraft experts.
Listen, Lovecraftians out there, do not at me. Okay?
I know.
Fucking hell, I don't know much.
We're doing what we can here, but just briefly, I mean, what do we mean when we say that something is Lovecraftian?
Well, in a nutshell, a very small one. It's sort of the interest in the unknown, whether that be cosmic or scientific.
Yes.
And actually, when he was writing, at the peak of his writing, at the turn of the century, that's when science was becoming more and more dependable and relied upon.
Right.
And so he saw that as a potential for horror, because people were explaining away the beautiful potential and mysteries of the unknown universe and cosmic dimensions. And Stuart Gordon, he actually came across... It was a series of stories called Herbert West Re-Animator. Yes. And he came across it by recommendation. He'd never read it because he was sick of all the vampire films going on, harkening back to Dracula. And so then he thought about Frankenstein and wanted to do something about that reanimation, bringing something back to life. And a friend of his told him to read that. And it's not readily available, so he had to go to like a local archive and read it in there and take notes. And then that's what came up with it. So, and then I think he got struck with the Lovecraft bug.
Right, there you go. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I'm not a huge expert in Lovecraft, but it feels like Re-Animator isn't a very Lovecraftian story in some ways compared to some of the others that we know. And what we talk about with Lovecraftian horror deals with like the cosmic and maybe this idea that there are these kind of other worlds and these big, huge, like creatures, hellish creatures, like just living beyond our reach and all that kind of thing. There's not really any of that in this. Is like you say, it's a Frankenstein story, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess it has that science element. But
yeah, exactly. It's got the scientific part of it. This is more on that, and I do think it's regarded by Lovecraft fans as one of his least Lovecraftian pieces, because the rest are much more about the universal, cosmic, and as you say, stuff like that. Although, the Frankenstein thing is much more relevant in Bride of Re-Animator, which I watched quite recently, and it's the same. You get much of the same.
Yeah, I've not seen that.
Although the duo, West in this one, he's splicing together things, so you get a hand attached to a foot, and that's one creature that he reanimates, or a bunch of fingers with an eyeball.
Amazing.
And then you get this horde of these bizarre sort of mutant creatures that he's created.
Is Jeffrey Combs in? He's in it with them, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because actually, we don't see him in enough. It feels like.
No, I mean, I don't know what
he's quite selective. It feels like with movies that he's in. He was in that brilliant Peter Jackson horror film, The Frighteners.
Yeah,
so good.
It's all the same people. Like, yeah,
it's tonally feels quite similar as well, doesn't it? That movie, yeah. I'm just going to briefly run through the definitions that I got from online about Lovecraftian. Again, it's kind of.
I'll have some gin while you do that.
Yeah, have some gin. There's three main bullet points basically that scholars have kind of defined as Lovecraftian horror, and they also call it cosmic horror as well. The first one, the fear and awe we feel when confronted by phenomena beyond our comprehension, whose scope extends beyond the narrow field of human affairs and boasts of cosmic significance. So yeah, it's that kind of awe. A contemplation of mankind's place in the vast, comfortless universe revealed by modern science. So I guess that one particularly does kind of fit with Re-Animator a bit. It does. I think all zombie movies, to an extent, like contemplate mankind's place in the world and that kind of thing, don't they? And then the last one, a naturalistic fusion of horror and science fiction in which presumptions about the nature of reality are eroded.
Oh, that one's sexy.
Right. Interesting. So yeah, it's quite an interesting thing to explore, and I know loads of movies out there get kind of, you know, labelled Lovecraftian and that kind of thing. And let's talk about Stuart Gordon then, because he, as a director, again, sort of not, I suppose, massively well known in the mainstream, but he's done quite a few gems, hasn't he? And he did. We should talk briefly about From Beyond, I think, which isn't a horror, which isn't a zombie movie, but it's the same director, like you say. It's most of the same actors, and it's also H.P. Lovecraft, and it feels much more like everything we just said about Lovecraft. It feels like From Beyond ticks all of those boxes, doesn't it?
It definitely from what we now know, especially. Yes. It really does, because it's about that opening the gate to the possible other dimension and what's in there, and what happens if you let it through, and how it affects our world, and whether you should do that, whether temptation is it's the Pandora's box
downfall kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Mankind's kind of desperation to see more, or open their eyes, or
and often to their demise.
Every journey begins in the mind. A flight of imagination. A vision of what might lie across the universe.
Catherine, run!
Or within the deepest regions of the subconscious. Dr. Edward Pretorius is about to embark on such a journey.
It's out of control. You've got to turn it off. Something's coming.
And I know we're technically talking about Re-Animator here, so I'm not going to go on for long about this. But
it's so good.
Oh my God. I just watched it for the first time. I'd never seen From Beyond, and I fucking loved it.
Yeah, I knew it.
It's so good, isn't it? Yeah. It's so much fun. I loved all of it. I loved the practical effects. Again, this kind of beautiful sort of colour palette.
The neon.
Oh, I love it.
It's just bright neon lights on people's faces all the time. It's elements of sort of Poltergeist and Ghostbusters in that sort of, the blowing smoky wind everywhere and stuff like that.
I love that lighting as well, when they open the door into the beyond and everything kind of goes reddy, pinky kind of. It's just so good. It looks so good.
Yeah, the eels, which must be actual eels that they've done an effect on, because it's fantastic. And obviously the effects, they've stepped up on this one a lot. But I did read that to save money, they filmed it in Italy, but they actually ran out of money during filming, and they couldn't actually complete all the effects they wanted. So that's not actually even the result they wanted. Wow. Apparently, it was going to be even further. But some of it is.
It's impressive.
So cool.
It's so cool. Yeah, I loved it. And I love those kind of very contained, like 3 people in a house kind of thing. And it's more about these kind of characters growing more and more. Well, they all go more and more insane, basically, don't they, as it goes on. Barbara Crampton gets a lot more to do in that film as well.
Totally, yeah. And forehead penises.
Forehead penises. It's very body horror and very Cronenberg, isn't it?
Yeah, because he loves a shaft,
an orifice, or
popping up.
Or a phallus.
Yeah, that's what I meant,
one or the other. A shaft. Yeah, lots of dicks.
Yeah,
basically
loads of dicks. Yeah. But if you do watch Re-Animator and From Beyond too close together, it can be very confusing because it's the same principal cast,
same look, same director. Exactly. Also Lovecraft.
And Barbara Crampton in another compromising position, but this time sexy.
Yes,
in bondage gear.
Amazing, amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, he's the Christopher Guest of horror.
Yes, he is. That's it. They do make a really good double bill, though. Actually, really fun to watch back to back, aren't they? And Jeffrey Combs very much I suppose he's not, but he's more of the straight man in From Beyond, isn't he? Yeah, he takes a step back until near the end, and then he.
Well, quite.
But yeah,
watch it, everyone.
Oh, massively recommend it. It's on. I saw it for free somewhere. I think it's on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix. Yes. So From Beyond is worth a watch. But anyway, enough of Lovecraft. Let's go back to Re-Animator.
Yes.
What sort of any highlights for you in terms of kind of best moments, or
definitely all the stuff with the sort of the comedy of the head and the body banging about.
Yes.
That sort of stuff.
Yes.
The final act when suddenly all the corpses just burst out of the morgue, and what I love is you can see how each one died.
Yes.
Like one has a blown out face, one is burned, and it's just nice little touches like that. And then there's this absurd moment when the intestine comes out of the stomach and just wraps around Jeffrey Combs.
That's more Lovecrafty then, that feels like, doesn't it?
Because it's
These
pulling
big
him into and it's sort of almost pulling him into another world.
Yeah, because again, there's this weird thing, and this happens a lot with zombie movies, I suppose, that like you either get sciencey ones or you get supernatural ones that are more like voodoo, witchcraft, whatever. This kind of has, I suppose this is predominantly about science, but towards the end there it goes completely nuts, right? Doesn't it? Yeah, we go into the supernatural completely.
Yeah, that final act is definitely my favourite bit.
Yeah. So do you think they go, what about as a horror movie then? I mean, we've already talked about how it's essentially more of a comedy. Does it get a kind of balance of comedy and horror within this movie, would you say?
If I'm really honest, probably not, because I didn't. If I'm looking for a horror film, I want to be scared, and it's it's not scary. It's exciting and it's fun, and funny.
Yes.
And and the visuals are titillating, but they're the sort of gore that I love and I want to see more of. So horror wise, no, I think it leans more towards comedy.
I would say so, definitely. But it's got some great. It's funny watching it because I did Pet Sematary last week, and I was watching these kind of quite close together as well, and obviously you've got these reanimated cats in both, but just how tonally, how different they are from each other. Pet Sematary is so played dead straight, takes it so seriously, doesn't it? But the cat is one of my highlights in Re-Animator.
That whole scene, and also just that, because obviously they don't have the budget to have an animatronic cat that can run around, just the way they use the swinging lights and the camera work, like it's running around the room, and they're just with a meow, and you believe it.
So good. I love that. I love the way that whole scene is played out. Like you say, the swinging lights.
Get out of here!
But actually, in Bride of Re-Animated, the exact same scene happens with a bat.
Oh,
there's a bat they reanimate, and then honestly, almost shot for shot, you just hear this squawking. You don't see it, and it's just this camera panning around with the light swinging. You're like, hang on,
wait a minute.
Homaging themselves.
That's brilliant. Did Stuart Gordon do that one as well? Did he?
Yeah, he. That one was Brian Yunza. Brian Yunza directed Society, and Bride of Re-Animator. He wrote From Beyond.
Oh,
so they're like a duo,
right.
And their credits together are insane. They work like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. They worked on together.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. I'm just looking through Stuart Gordon's IMDb.
Yeah, Castle Freak, by the way, I really recommend. I don't know if you can get it.
Oh, really?
Anymore, because I used to rent it when I was a kid a lot from the VHS shop, and it is so disgusting and disturbing. And Barbara Crampton's in it.
Brilliant.
Again, in some really awful positions that things she's made to do, but it's gross, and I just don't think.
Oh yeah, I like the poster for it.
There you go. Great. That's what used to make me pick it up every week.
Amazing,
pretty much.
Really scary looking face on the front.
Yeah,
it's
really disturbing, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can get it legally.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's a shame.
So I'm hoping Arrow or someone will pick it up at some point and make a Blu-ray,
because he's done some proper horror, like we said, but he's also, like you say, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, the series of films and the TV series, and Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Honey, I Blew Up the Kids, classic. And again, some amazing sort of practical effects and science gone wrong.
It's
and
exactly,
that kind of stuff,
he's obviously got that. He's got a hard on for science.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, he started off as a theatre director.
Well, he wanted to make Re-Animator a stage play.
Yes,
that's
his first idea.
But then he was convinced, once he sort of started writing it, the treatment and stuff, then he wanted to make it into a TV series.
Right.
And then he was advised the money is in film, in horror, so
Yes.
do that. But then there was a musical of
God.
Re-Animator made in 2011.
Oh my god.
6 to 12 minutes, time really flies. The brain regenerates and dies. One by one, the cells give up the ghost. 12 minutes pass, and then after 12, then after 12.
I bet it works well as a musical.
I'm sure, because Carrie the musical did.
Yeah, and Re-Animator is so heightened, like the performances, and it's so, everything is cranked up to 11. I could imagine it almost feels like a musical sometimes, the way it works, you know?
Yeah, what I heard about from what I've heard of the musical, it's just an absolute riot.
Oh, brilliant. I bet it is. I bet it's amazing. And Evil Dead got turned into a musical as well, and I never got to see that.
That's right,
But yeah,
me neither.
I bet it's great. There's been some good horror on stage this year. Stevie, have you been to see Barbarian Sound Studio yet?
Well, I'm going the week after next, in the last week. I'm going to the final matinee, yes.
Amazing. It's brilliant.
I'm really looking forward to
Absolutely
it.
brilliant. I suppose it must be hard for you as a theatre.
Yeah, it is.
to
So I had to take a
actually
holiday
go
day
and see.
because I'm in the theatre, because I'm performing on all the days that other shows are on. And also then quite often when you've got a day off, you don't want to be in a theatre. Of
course you don't,
Then there
yeah.
are some things that come up. And actually my friends are involved in it. Like my friend wrote it and adapted
amazing.
it. So I have to see it anyway, but
Brilliant.
luckily I want to.
Yes. Oh, great. Oh, it's so good. Absolutely amazing. Also saw the Twilight Zone on stage last week,
Yeah,
which is brilliant.
I saw an ad recently that was on somewhere.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's not really been publicised very much, but it's really fun. And there's a Night of the Living Dead show coming to London.
I saw that as well.
Yeah,
it's all
amazing.
happening.
It's all happening. Horror
And Ghost
on
Stories
stage.
is back on.
Ghost Stories is back, exactly. Very exciting. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they'll do with that. But I think Re-Animator would make a great musical. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Hope it comes over here.
I'm just having a look at some of Stuart Gordon's other 80s movies. He made Dolls. Do you remember Dolls?
I've got the Blu-ray and
my
I've still not
God.
watched it.
It's so good. Well, you'd buy it just for the cover, right?
Well, of course I did. That's exactly why I bought the
The
Blu-ray.
dog just kind of holding these eyeballs, like, just looking absolutely terrifying. The tagline: "They walk, they talk, they kill."
Amazing.
It is brilliant. I remember seeing it as a kid and loving it.
Right, yeah.
so-
Well, I've got it, so I must watch it. Maybe I'll do that tonight.
Yes, give it a watch. It was kind of similar to Dolly Dearest. And
Well,
you like
that's why,
Dolly
because
Dearest.
that's one of my prized possessions is my
Yes.
80s Dolly Dearest
Yes,
VHS
yes.
copy.
Amazing. Well, you'll like Dolls. You'll like Dolls, definitely.
Awesome.
Brilliant. Anything else you want to mention on Re-Animator before we move on? Have we missed anything? I suppose we should talk a bit about the zombies.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I mean, would you call this a zombie movie, do you think?
I think a zombie movie is any film where the dead come back to life, so yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I mean, you could definitely make an argument that it's more of a Frankenstein type story,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like we've said, but especially the second half and the final act, it's just zombies everywhere,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
It's-
Yeah. And for some reason they want to kill.
Yes, exactly.
So-
Yeah, how do these zombies compare to things that we've seen previously, Romero zombies or Fulci zombies or whatever?
Well, these are sort of, there's something more medical, like they've all either died by natural causes or murder, for instance. Yes. And it doesn't seem, and it can't be passed on.
No,
You know,
it's not like they're going to bite you and you're going to become
absolutely
one.
no.
Yes.
They, for some reason, they just want to kill you, and it doesn't matter. There's no explanation.
Yeah.
Just forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because this is, the life serum, this that brings people back to life, and so it's a different kind of zombie in that way. It's not passed on, and there isn't a fear that the world's gonna go to ruin and get infected in any sort of way. But I mean, with Re-Animator, you can't. There's no rhyme or reason for anything, and so it's hard to compare it because it just is what it is.
Yes.
And the more you question it, the less you'll like it. So just don't.
Yeah, totally. It's so much fun. So you did say, you don't love it. What kind of negative comments do you have about it? What didn't you like? We've talked about obviously that awkward scene with the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that's it's dated in that way, but I wasn't that excited because it once you know what's going on, nothing surprises you. There's no surprises or twists, or not that you need a twist, but he starts reanimating, and he's going to reanimate human.
Yeah.
And there's a bad guy.
Yeah.
And there's nothing new about the format and I don't think they set out to do that. They just were like, let's get a basic story. It's loosely based on the Lovecraft, and we just want visuals, and so that's what it is. It's a visual fest, and obviously now seeing what we have seen and what can be made now, it just lacks something because
Yeah.
the visuals aren't that impressive anymore.
Agreed. And I think it feels like a great vessel for, look at all this like gross stuff we can give you. But yeah, you're right. If you compare it to something like The Thing, for example, which has all of those amazing visual effects as well, but also it has the characters, the paranoia, and like a really compelling story, which I think, Re-Animator lacks, doesn't it? It is purely a kind of effects fest, I suppose. Yeah. And again, maybe that's why I preferred From Beyond a little bit more, because again, it had these weird character paranoias and relationships and everything. Cool. All right. Well, I suppose generally speaking, then finally, would you kind of recommend this to people still, to horror fans that haven't seen it?
I would if you're into retro body horror and sort of silly camp fun.
Yeah, it's a great fun time, I think,
Totally.
isn't it? I would say, I do feel like it's a must-watch for any horror fan, really, because it's quite a classic. But I would say watch it with mates and maybe have a drink while you watch it. And don't take it seriously.
No,
almost.
totally.
Okay, at this point in the episode, very, very excitingly, I'm going to play you my discussion with the brilliant Barbara Crampton. Now, for anyone out there who doesn't know, I'm sure most of you do, Barbara Crampton is a legend in the horror genre. She's been starring in classic horror and cult movies since the mid-80s, and one of her first big roles was indeed Re-Animator in 1985. She then went on to star in The Beyond, which we discussed, as well as a whole bunch of other classic cult movies, such as Chopping Mall, and even the original Puppet Master. But in the last few years, she's had something of a renaissance. She actually took a bit of a break from acting, but then she starred in Adam Wingard's brilliant horror movie You're Next in 2011, and that essentially kind of reignited her once again as a horror legend. And since then, she starred in a whole bunch of brilliant horror movies, including Lords of Salem, We Are Still Here, Beyond the Gates, Road Games, Dead Night, Reborn, and of course her latest movie, Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, which is out on general release in the UK next Friday, the 19th of April. Very, very exciting. So I got the chance to sit down and chat to her about Puppet Master, about Re-Animator, and about her career to date. So here is my chat with the wonderful Barbara Crampton. Hello, Barbara.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. Hello to you.
So first of all, let me ask you a little bit about the new movie, The Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich. I saw this last year at Fright Fest, absolutely loved it. Just tell us a little bit about the movie and how you came to be involved in it.
Well, I think it was, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, I guess. I got a call from Dallas Saunier, who's the producer on the film, and he said that he had secured the rights from Charlie Band to make an alternative universe of the Puppet Master series. I mean, some people are thinking it's sort of part of the whole series, and I guess in some ways it is, but at that time, Dallas said to Charlie Band, I want to make my own Puppet Master universe, and you can keep the rights to your own Puppet Master universe, but I'll pay you to use the rights to make my own thing. And Charlie said, okay. So, I know Dallas and I know Charlie, and Dallas said, there's a part for you that we'd like you to be involved in. And since you were involved with the very first Puppet Master, and would you like to do it? So that's basically how it happened for me.
Amazing. And this is, I think, is it the 13th Puppet Master film in the series? I struggle to actually keep track, but especially with all the different sort of timelines and universes and that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the 13th, I mean, if you want to say that it's in this universe, it is to a certain degree, but Charlie Band also at the same time, I think, was making Access Terminus or something like that. It's called, it has a completely different name than our Puppet Master, and they were making them at the same time. So is it part of the series or is it? I don't know, but it is like the 14th one or the 13th one or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Anyway.
And actually, you did appear in the very first Puppet Master movie, Barbara, didn't you?
Yes, and I had done Re-Animator and From Beyond for those guys, and when they were doing Puppet Master, which they never thought it would become what it is today, I think it's their longest running series, they said, there's not really a part for you in Puppet Master, but there's a cameo we'd like you to do. Would you like to do it? And I thought, okay, that'll just be fun. I'll come in for one day. So, and it's fun. I mean, my part was was brief, but the series has gone on for so long. There's been so many of them made, and because of my being in the first one, that prompted them to ask me to be in this one, and so it goes back to that old thing they say about actors. There's no small parts, only small actors. Little did I know that just having that small part in the first one would lead to me having the part in this new one that Dallas Sonye produced. So I'm pretty excited.
That's amazing. And you've been in so many horror classics over the last few decades. And I just wondered, are you a horror fan yourself, just as a viewer? Do you enjoy watching horror films?
Well, I am now because it's sort of grown on me. But I have to admit, I wasn't really one of those fans that grew up with it and was a voracious, horror lover. I think it was really only after I started acting in them that I realized how much fun they were and how much I enjoyed them myself. And then I started watching more and more of them. And now, since a lot of these movies play at film festivals, and that's how you find a distributor for your film. And that didn't used to be the case when I was younger. We had distribution built in. I mean, you basically did a movie and you knew, who was making it, it was going to be going to video. But, at that time, everybody was buying videos, and, you rarely would make a movie without knowing who your distributor was. And today it's different. You have to go to all these film festivals. So now when I go to all these film festivals, I see so many more horror movies than I've ever seen in my life for like the past 5 years since I came back with You're Next I took a break from acting and came back with You're Next about 5 or 6 years ago. And I've watched so many horror movies in the last 5 years. It's really, given me a deep appreciation more of the genre than I've ever had before, really.
I mean, I feel like I'm quite a hardened horror fan. I'm quite good with gore and that kind of thing, but there were moments in this Puppet Master movie that even shocked me. I mean, what did you think of some of those scenes? Are you good with gore?
Oh my God, I know. Actually, I'm not. I've seen a lot of movies, so I'm not hardened to gore because I still have a hard time watching it. I'm still a pretty good audience member, even though I mean, I'm not desensitized, to all of this stuff. The gore really gets to me, and I've even covered my eyes watching some of the Puppet Master movie. And some really scary movies really, really get to me, and I can't watch them. I mean, I watch them, but I watch them, through my fingers. And I scream a lot when I'm watching the movies, and I crouch down in my chair, in the theater, and there's a lot of gore in this movie. But there's a lot of fun too. There's a lot of comedy and a lot of gore, so it sort of, mitigates too much of the gore, I think, with a lot of the comedy.
Definitely, and I think it also feels like a bit of a throwback, doesn't it, to the kind of horror that we saw in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, as somebody who's had a career in the horror genre for this long, have you witnessed the sort of evolution, the changes in trends and that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. It's even like fashion, because horror has its own trends. And sometimes, we've seen the torture porn era, we've seen the psychological horror, we've seen sort of the Blumhouse model, which is really highly in fashion with a lot of their big blockbusters, which is more supernatural. And, we had the slasher era, and a lot of those things, come and go just like fashion does. And it's sort of what is in vogue and what's part of the trend. But I guess, there has been a resurgence in the last number of years, I've noticed, with 80s throwback horror kind of being in the forefront. And I kept thinking that was sort of on its way out for a little bit, but people keep making those kinds of movies. So, maybe that's a little niche. That's sort of a sub-genre of, a lot of the horror movies that are out today. But I do notice that, Puppet Master was the first movie that Fangoria actually had their, was over their banner, under their banner actually, and now that company is they just finished making Satanic Panic, and we're also going to be doing a reboot of Castle Freak that I was also in, and that's under the Fangoria banner, and I think that their whole idea is to actually keep those movies that were the ones that fans really loved from the 80s, that were sort of high concept and had a lot of gore and a lot of, stuff that's sort of in your face horror, alive. They want to keep that alive. So, and Puppet Master is, a great representation of what that company is doing right now. And I see that for the short foreseeable future.
Over the last couple of weeks, actually, we've been looking specifically at some of these sort of early 80s movies, zombie ones in particular. But I would love to ask you a bit about Re-Animator, which we've been talking about this week. Obviously, that was one of your earliest horror movie roles. And I just wondered what your sort of memories of making that movie are. I mean, was it a good experience for you? Obviously, working with director Stuart Gordon and working alongside actors like Jeffrey Combs. I mean, what was that experience like?
Well, it was great fun. It was a job for all of us, and one of my first movies that I ever acted in. I think it might have been the third movie that I ever did, and no one realized that it was going to have the cultural impact that it did and have as long a life as it's had. And for us at the time, we were just making a fun film and hoping people would see it. We had no idea that it was going to, become what it's become. I will say that working on that film, Stuart Gordon came from the theater, as did Jeffrey and Bruce and I, and Carolyn Gordon, Stuart's wife, and I think there is sort of, a bigness to that movie, and maybe it's a bit melodramatic, or, it feels sort of like, a horror opera in a way. It's very big and bold and kind of shocking. And I think people, saw something different when that movie came out. I don't think that we knew that we were doing something different, but I do know that it has lasted this long because it's so big and over the top, and I think that has something to do with all of us, coming from the theater. Maybe it was kind of a perfect storm of the actors and the script and Stewart, and it just it had a little magic to it, and little did we know.
Definitely, it's quite unique, isn't it? And I think you're right when you said, some of it is still quite shocking in a way. And one of the moments that I think, we talked about as being still quite shocking, maybe even more so in 2019, is that scene in which you are, I suppose, sexually assaulted by David Gale's character, the sort of severed head. It's a grueling scene to watch in a lot of ways, even though the film itself is quite fun. I just wondered, what was that particular scene like to shoot? I mean, was that uncomfortable for you?
To be honest with you, I don't think of any scene any different than any other scene. So I don't think it really was like, oh my God, shooting that scene. Yeah, of course, there's some delicate material involved with it, but you have to play the reality of what's going on. And even if it's over the top and weird and strange, you have to be in the moment and feel like that's realistic. So I didn't approach that scene any differently than I would approach any other scene that I was playing ever, so to me it's all the same, but it's just part of the package of what it was. I wish I could tell you that it was shocking and scary and oh my God and freaky, but it really wasn't. It on film it looks a lot more intense than it was when we were shooting it. I mean, it was part of the story. And David Gale, who plays Dr. Hill, was so lovely and wonderful to me, as was everybody on the set. So it was just, it was sort of a funny play on words joke. And but when we were doing the scene, it was quite serious and just part of any other scene that we were doing that day.
Oh, that's great. And, I guess it is apparent that you guys all enjoyed working together because most of you came together again, obviously you and Stuart Gordon and Jeffrey Combs, for From Beyond a couple of years later. And what was that movie like to make? Because, again, you got a slightly more meaty role in that film. So as an actor, that particular movie must have been a real treat.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe Re-Animator was my audition for From Beyond because we all we all worked so well together. And, you know, I had the sort of supportive girlfriend role in Re-Animator. And one of the things Stuart has said about me, which I really appreciate, is that he thinks that I'm a fearless actor and nothing phases me. And so maybe that's true, but he really I was the first person he thought of for From Beyond, and he wanted me to play that part. And I think that it gave me an opportunity, after having worked with him as a supportive actress in Re-Animator, to have a bigger character in From Beyond. And that part was much more satisfying for me as an actor, because I got to play so many different, kind of representations of that character within one movie. I mean, she was a doctor and then was trying to be a heroine and, you know, help out Jeffrey Combs' character and sort of solve the mystery of what was in the Beyond. And then, you know, all these things from inside of her passions were unleashed, and you know, she just had a lot to play. That character had a lot to play. So it was really a wonderful experience for me to be able to have such a big part in a movie like that, and also have that become a cult classic, and to work with people that by that time I already had a shorthand with. You know, we were all really good friends by that point and really worked well together. So it was very satisfying for me.
It's such a great film. It still holds up so well, I think. So as you mentioned, you did have a bit of a break from acting through sort of the late 90s into the 2000s, and then you've had this incredible kind of renaissance, this resurgence over the last few years with movies like You're Next, We Are Still Here, Beyond the Gates, obviously Puppet Master this year. Some really, really interesting projects. So what's that been like for you, sort of coming back to the horror genre sort of later on in your career and getting, I would say in some ways, even more interesting parts, right?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, first of all, I feel incredibly lucky that since I've come back with Your Next, I've gotten probably the best roles of my career in the past few years, really. You know, I think Your Next is right up there with some of my older movies as far as becoming a cult classic and something that a lot of people have seen and people really know very well. But what I notice in the film business, you know, working today, there's a lot of people making movies, and there's so many of them. There's so much to choose from that the audience is spread out a little bit thinner. So, you know, while I'm working and making a lot of these movies, a lot of people haven't seen some of them. I think they have maybe a smaller audience because there's just so much product out there for people to look at. But it's been an incredible experience for me to come back and actually be working as much as I have been working the past few years. And out of the last few ones that I've done, I'd have to say one of my favorites, or my top favorite, would probably be We Are Still Here. I really loved that character, and that was kind of it was shot like from the point of view of the 70s, that's when it was set, but it has a lot of those elements that people love from the 80s, with a lot of crazy sort of, big over-the-top horror elements, gory horror elements to it at the end. But in the beginning, it does feel like more like a 70s horror movie where it's psychological and kind of disturbing and sad, and it evokes to me some of the movies that we all remember from the 70s. And I love that character of a woman. I love movies that really feel grounded in something that's really real and has emotion to it. And that character had lost her son in an auto accident, and then she was trying to, with her husband, kind of move on with their life and move to a different city and start anew. And the part really resonated with me as a mom. I have children myself, and I couldn't imagine losing one or both of them and how that would make me feel. And I was able to interview a couple of people that I sort of knew in the periphery of my life, because both of them had lost their children in that situation in an auto accident, and they were gone. And I interviewed both ladies, and they were nice enough and obliging enough to answer some of my questions. And I wrote down their answers on paper that I would carry with me on set. And so in between the scenes, I would kind of read their answers so that I could stay in that realm of, you know, what I think that they were feeling and what they had gone through in their lives and what they still carried with them. And it was incredibly moving and deep and sad. And I appreciated, you know, having something that weighty to work on.
Yeah, it's a really great movie, and I think it is because of those reasons you said. I think, you know, it's like with Hereditary last year, isn't it? Right. Sometimes these horror movies that pack more of an emotional punch can be much more thrilling, much more horrific, much more powerful.
Well, you know, to me, I always want to feel something in a movie. I want something to really grab me, because in life we're always walking around trying to sort of cover up our feelings or sort of monitor them. And when we go to the movies, it's an escape and it's a release and it's a chance to actually watch somebody else owning their feelings and having them. And, you know, you get a really nice kind of release when you're watching films that are connected emotionally. And so that's the kind of movie that I want to watch. And those are the kinds of roles when you play them that I feel, to me anyway, are the most rewarding. And any good horror movie is only going to be as good as the drama that's within the horror movie, because if you take all the horror elements out, you still have to have a movie that makes sense with characters that you care about. And to me, the movies that last are the ones that, you know, just have that emotional resonance.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that leads me nicely into my last question, which I ask everyone. What is your favourite ever horror movie?
Well, I vacillate between two. And I would say it's The Shining or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, yeah. And,
you know, I think The Shining, for me, has more emotional resonance, especially for Shelley Duvall's character, really. That's what I mean. Even though Jack Nicholson's just, you know, amazing in that movie, what that woman goes through, and you know what happens to her, and how she survives at the end, and that there's a possibility that a child, you know, might, you know, perish in the film. Is like, oh my God, the stakes are so high in that film.
Yeah, I feel like I appreciate her and Shelley Duvall's performance more and more every time I watch that film, over Jack Nicholson even, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because she, a lot of people said that they didn't like her performance in the movie initially when it came out.
Right, yeah.
And Stanley Kubrick was famous for saying, you know, I mean, we all know that he berated her on the set and made her do that scene on the stairs like 150 times. And he was not nice to her, and he told the crew not to be nice to her. And I mean, maybe that was part of him trying to, you know, put her in that space that character was in the film. I don't know, but yeah, I think she went a little mad on that movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, it definitely shows, right? I mean, she just feels it's hard to watch, and I agree with you. The more times I watch it, I really feel her. And I think she was just amazing in it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's the same with your other favourite, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There is a feeling of true madness in all of the people involved in that film as well, isn't there?
True madness, and you know, the fact that Sally Hardesty gets, you know, she actually survives at the end. Really want her to survive, and she does, and you're really pulling for her. You know, so therein, you know, that sort of belies what I was saying before about the emotional resonance. There's not a lot of emotional resonance in that movie. It's just balls out horror and scary and freaky. But the fact that, you know, she hangs on at the end and she survives is like, you can't even believe it, right?
Absolutely.
You know, it's just amazing.
Barbara, thank you so much for joining me. Just wondered, what have you got coming up next? Any other horror projects in the pipeline?
Well, there's a movie that's playing the festival circuit now called Reborn, sort of an updated Carrie movie. Julian Richards, who some of you might know, was the director of that, and I'm in that film with Michael Pare, who I was in Puppet Master with, and also Ray Don Chong is in the movie. And you should be seeing that within the next 6 months or so. And I'm getting ready to go out of town to shoot the Castle Freak reboot. I don't have a part in that, but I'm helping to produce that movie.
Amazing. So exciting. Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you. Nice to chat with you.
Oh, what a treat. A big thank you to the amazing Barbara Crampton. What a legend. It's actually the third time that I've met Barbara Crampton now, and every time she's been an absolute delight. So, Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, is out next week. That's Friday, the 19th of April. I did actually talk about it during our Fright Fest Roundup episode in 2018 that came out at the end of last summer with Adam Robinson. And I also talked about it in the end of year review episode, in which I said it included one of my favourite horror movie death scenes of the year. So I would hugely recommend Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich. If you get a chance, please do check it out. Okay, let's return to my chat with Stevie Webb as we get into our discussion of Robert Zemeckis' Death Becomes Her from 1992.
A touch of magic. Drink that potion, and you'll never grow even one day older. Bottoms up. No warning.
Now a warning?
Siempre viva! Live forever! Ernest, I'm in the morgue. They think I'm dead.
You are, but you're not. Are you telling me it doesn't hurt when I do this?
It doesn't hurt.
She's dead!
She's dead, Ernest.
Now he's dead.
He's dead? Ernest is dead? Everybody's dead!
You pushed me down the stairs.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to try and break this down as easy as possible because it's quite twisty and turning. There's a lot. So I'm trying to just do what you need to know, even though there's a lot in between there.
Yeah.
So basically, we're in the late 70s, and this blonde bombshell actress, Madeline Ashton, her career's on the decline. And backstage at her Broadway show one night, her frenemy, I'll say, Helen, brings her new fiancé and plastic surgeon, Ernest, to meet Madeline backstage. And basically, within a flash, Madeline steals Helen's fiancé and marries him herself, sending Helen into this psychiatric breakdown. Okay, cut to years later, and Helen, who had the breakdown, is obviously fine now, and she invites the couple to her book launch. And Madeline frets about her appearance because it's years later. And she's advised by her surgeon that she should contact this lady called Liesel, who has the means to help her in her quest for youth. But she just ignores that. But then when they arrive to the book launch and see Helen, they see that she's absolutely stunning and breathtaking and looks younger than she's ever looked. And so Madeline's soured by this and visits this Liesel, who offers her this elixir that will stop and even rewind the aging process. Also, meanwhile this is happening, Helen and Ernest are plotting to kill Madeline. Anyway, fuck that. It's confusing. But on the night in question, Madeline and Ernest, they have this altercation, and he pushes her down the stairs and kills her. She dead. Bitch is dead. Only to find that her corpse then, of course, rises, and she is now undead. And then she hears about the plot to kill her, and so she shoots Helen and discovers she also drank the elixir, and she's also now the Walking Dead. And so basically, Ernest, who used to be a plastic surgeon, is now a mortician, so he's really useful to them, and they band together because he can cover all their dead grey skin.
Yes,
and
they need
fix
him
all their
around.
parts. Absolutely. And so then they try to convince him to drink the elixir so that he can be their eternal handyman.
Yes,
that's
amazing.
The story.
Amazing. So, are you a fan of this film?
It's a perfect film. It's a perfect movie, honestly. And I think I enjoyed it more this time. I must have watched it 10 times over the years. And I can't actually count how many times. They just don't really make these films anymore like this, where it's these huge Hollywood stars in this
B-movie.
Comedy / family / horror.
Yeah, agreed.
It's crazy. It's like like Addams Family and Beetlejuice, those sort of films.
Yeah, you're so right. They don't exist anymore.
And very much so The Witches of Eastwick. You know, this came off the back of that. It's very much startlingly similar in some aspects.
Definitely.
But yeah, it just doesn't happen anymore.
I mean, this is probably the first and only time ever on this horror podcast I'm going to talk about Meryl Streep. I mean, it's got
Queen.
Meryl Streep in it. Absolutely amazing. Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn and Bruce Willis. And Bruce Willis probably the best he's ever been. Let's be
well, you
honest
forget
as well.
that he can do that sort of comedic, bumbling guy.
It's brilliant. And why do more people not talk about this movie? I feel like it's been forgotten.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I don't understand because well, we'll talk about the effects in a bit because that was at the forefront at the time.
Course.
But I don't understand what people's problem was. I don't think it landed in a specific genre. I don't think people knew. Do they take their kids to see it?
Yes.
Or
absolutely.
is it for horror fans? Or is it for fans of serious actors like Meryl Streep?
It's very odd, isn't it? It is an odd mix.
And she gives I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's one of the first times before Devil Wears Prada that you really see that comedy from her, and she's so good, like the almost Disney expressions.
Totally. Before this, it feels like she was very serious, right? You know, Deer Hunter and Sophie's Choice.
Exactly, totally. And you know, and her delivery of iconic lines like "Now a warning," and "You pushed me down the stairs."
I love that. I love that. Yeah,
and she's amazing. So
I don't see my ass.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think people didn't know where to place it, I guess. So I don't think, even though it did really well at the box office.
It did very well, but I just feel like, compared to some classics, I feel like it's never talked about anymore. It's weird. It feels like it's been forgotten. Time has forgotten it in some way.
I was speaking
and
to
it's really
someone
odd.
at work who's, she's 24 the other day, and she's never heard of it.
Yeah.
And I thought, but that's crazy. It's a classic film that everyone knows.
Yeah.
And it has crept up. It's become a cult classic, of
course. Yeah. But it's so big and mainstream, and it must have had a huge budget because, like, we talk about the effects, but they were revolutionary. And Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, Bruce Willis, and Robert Zemeckis. I mean, Robert Zemeckis, again, he's like, you know, one tier down from Spielberg, right? You know, and he had done the Back to the Future movies by this point. He was about to do, you know, Forrest Gump and all of these other classics as well. And he's very much, I think he's always been a bit of a pioneer of kind of visual effects and that kind of thing as well, hasn't he? So this was a good project for him. But I think you're right. I think that ultimately maybe a lot of people don't quite know where this movie lands. Like, what is it? And is it a family film? I can't remember if there are any elements in it. I mean, could you show it to kids? I don't really know. You know, it's not as much as the Addams Family, right?
No, totally not. But then watching it this time, I did think it was family friendly because
it's totally cartoony.
Exactly. Well, you can see it's the guy who directed Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which of course is
a perfect film.
Another perfect film.
Perfect from start to finish.
And I think maybe that's the illusion that is wonderful that he does with Roger Rabbit and this, that it comes across slightly Disney.
Yes.
And of course it's not, because actually
both
the themes are really
fucking
dark.
And actually what I love, and this conversation may be just gushing about the Death Becomes Her in it, but I love that it's like a throwback to old Hollywood as well. I'm a sucker for movies that have that kind of Sunset Boulevard-esque feel to
I just
them,
got goosebumps.
Yeah.
And it's so perfectly pitched, the golden era of Hollywood in this. And of course, what it flips on its head is you see the people rather than the film this time. So it's set in that world, but you see these desperate, vain people.
Yes,
who want to be these who used to be these movie stars, for instance, or stuff like that. And so you see the flip side of it, I guess. Beyond the glamour.
Totally. Yeah. And it's so brilliant, wonderfully scathing of just the whole world of Hollywood and stars and plastic surgery and the shallowness of it all, and it's brilliant. Even it opens with like a big Broadway musical that everyone is hating and walking out of as well.
That's right. Madeline Ashton in Songbird, and that's the beginning of the start of her decline.
Yes,
and but it is terrible. It's
so
good. And I think you can just hear a lady saying, "Imagine making a musical about Sweet Bird of Youth," which is famously Tennessee Williams' least favourite play, and sort of unfinished and quite jaggedy. So why would you make a musical out of something like that? So it's another little jab at theatre and the business. And
I love it.
It's very clever.
It is.
And Zemeckis also, this was his first dabble into the genre, but then obviously he went on to things like what's the Michelle 5'1" and Richard Gere.
Yeah, of course.
What Lies
Beneath. I forgot he did that. Yeah.
And he also directed some Tales from the Crypt episodes.
Yeah.
And also he produced. I'll forgive him for it.
Yeah.
But he was responsible for that wave of remakes of films in the 90s. He did the remake of House on Haunted Hill, 13 Ghosts, and House of Wax.
Oh my God, those films.
That wave of remakes.
Wow.
But it's fine, they're
Ghost
fine.
Castle
Ghost Ship.
Yeah, but what was the company that made them all was called like
Dark Castle.
Dark Castle, that's
right.
it. Yeah. So maybe he was involved in that.
Yeah, probably.
Interesting. Yeah, what an incredible kind of eclectic filmography he's had.
He really has.
It's really strange, isn't it?
Actually, in that way, Spielberg has. When you think about it.
Totally, exactly. I do, and you're right. It's cartoony, and yet, like you say, there's those little throwaway lines like that are very clever, and there is a lot of detail. It just makes me laugh, even that their names are Mad and Hell. Basically, these two
I've
women.
not even thought about that.
It just
That's
made me
really
laugh so
good.
much when they just keep.
And then his
Mad,
is Ernest.
Hell, and Ernest. Yeah, just so funny. There are so many.
Hell.
It's just so many funny little throwaway lines and details like that. And Isabella Rossellini.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. I was questioning my sexuality because I already knew I was gay by this point. But then I was like, hang on, am I?
Wait a minute.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Wow. That was something.
She's incredible, isn't she?
She really is. And scary as well.
Scary, sexy, both.
Yeah. You do whatever she told you.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
The secret that we share must never become public. You may continue your career for 10 years of perfect, unchanged beauty. But at the end of that time, before people become suspicious, you have to disappear from public view forever. You can retire. You can stage your own phony death. Or, as one of my clients simply said, I want to be alone.
Would you, that's what I was thinking while watching it, if somebody offered you this elixir, would you take it? I mean, you're an actor, Stevie. You're a very handsome actor. Do you feel that pressure of like, looks are important in your job, and do I have to stay looking as young and good as I can for as long as I can?
I'm going to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, I'm playing a 19-year-old, so that feels great.
There you go.
But I've never really, until honestly very, very recently, and I'm working with a lot of other people who are playing 19, and they're much closer to the age than I am.
Right.
And I'm starting to, and I've never questioned it, I'm starting to see the laugh lines and stuff.
Right.
Genuinely, recently, I thought about getting filler.
Right, there you go.
My cheek lines, and then I thought, what are you doing? What's making you doing this? What's
you
wrong with you?
absolutely don't need it, but I can see why there is that pressure. There must be that certain amount of pressure.
But I've never felt it because I've never been the old one. But now I'm working my way up. I'm starting to see what everyone talks about, and I've always been like, oh, you're fine. You grow old gracefully. You don't need to do anything like that. And now I'm sort of going, oh
no, don't get any filler.
Feel it. No, I'm not going to go
do it.
As if. Come on.
But yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I suppose that's the thing. It's a real thing that exists, especially in this world of entertainment and showbiz and all of that kind of thing as well. What I love as well is that clearly Meryl Streep is not as old as her character, right? Like they must have aged her in order for them to be able to de-age
her.
That's right, isn't it?
But that's the thing, because she looks great. She looks great, but then you realise the Meryl Streep that is created when she has the elixir. Oh, that's the real Meryl Streep.
That's the real Meryl Streep.
The one before.
Because actually the one before, still looks great and kind of looks like Meryl Streep does now, right?
She does,
2019,
exactly.
which is what's really interesting. Because of
but
course
I mean, they go over the
incredibly.
top and stuff, like they're putting liver spots on her hands, and it's like she's meant to be 48. Come on, jeez.
Yes,
but just to show the difference, I get it.
Yes,
artistic license.
If I have one negative, it would be the first 20 minutes of this movie and how quickly it has to like jump through about 8 story beats.
Oh yeah, because it says 7 more years later. 7 more years.
And it's like we've got to have this moment where Goldie Hawn becomes fat and eats and tries to kill it, and then goes to a mental, and then goes and it's a shame that it's like we've got to get all of this plot before we can get to the elixir and the good stuff, basically. But
they're the bits I never remember. I always forget. Every time I watch it, I go, oh, I forget there's this bit where she's fat. Oh, and I forget it opens with a musical number. Yes. It's just because it is so quick.
Yes, it's bizarre. So we've talked already about this, but the performances. Do you have a favourite of the 3, or are they all as good as each other?
I think it's Goldie Hawn.
Yeah,
for me, I really do. Yeah. I mean, I've always loved her.
Yeah,
she's brilliant. She's always since like Private Benjamin and stuff like that. Just I've just always adored her. And And the most, I think, obviously the twisted neck is great, but the most iconic thing I can ever think of is that hole in her stomach, in that red jumper with red hair and the white zombie eyes.
Yeah.
That image.
Yeah.
But also, she's great. And I think when you put anyone next to Meryl Streep, you think they're going to come across inferior.
Yeah.
But she holds her own and sometimes peaks. I really think so.
I agree. All three of them are just brilliant. I love all of them at different points. They all become my favourite at different points. And it's like watching a really good play with these three brilliant characters kind of all turning on each other. It's got a feel, hasn't it, of like a kind of old theatre farce a little bit in some ways.
Yeah. It'd be a great musical.
It would.
I don't know why, but I'm sure someone's got the rights. I actually saw a drag show a while ago. This company called Mad Drag Night. It's a charity drag night.
Yeah.
And they basically did the whole of Death Becomes Her in drag.
Amazing. Well, that is a thing as well, isn't it?
good.
Right, in the Soho Theatre this year, Drag Becomes Her.
That's right. Yeah, with Jinx Monsoon.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's become a real gay cult
That's
classic.
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose it is a very camp movie, I suppose.
Of course. And also the characters are so heightened and cartoony and just everything you want in the gay world.
Well, it's very cartoony. I even thought when we first see Goldie Hawn having lost all the weight and she looks stunning at that book launch, she looks like Jessica Rabbit, right?
Totally.
She's got the red dress, the hair, the big lips. They've literally made her into Jessica Rabbit. Yeah, so good. Let's talk a bit about the body horror then, like what this film really is, the horror elements. We've got Meryl Streep with this kind of twisted neck, and like
she
you said,
gets it in the neck
Hawn,
3 times.
Get 3 times, so good. And Goldie Hawn with the hole through her. I mean, how do you think that looks? We talked about the practical effects in Re-Animator, and obviously now we're very much in CGI world. How does it hold up, do you think?
I still think it's utterly fantastic.
Yeah,
I really do.
Agreed.
I genuinely, just as I watched it a few days ago, questioned so many things and thought, I don't know how they actually did that.
Yes.
And just little touches like once she has had the hole blown through her, just the shadows on the wall still having the hole in her.
I love that.
It's genius.
Yeah.
And how the fuck do they do that bit where she sits down on the couch and the broomstick goes through it, which she's thrown through it, all that sort of stuff. It's so clever.
Good.
In the drag show that I saw, they had she had the jumper on, and then she had a circular mirror.
Oh, nice.
With the fabric coming over it, so wherever she turned, it looked like it was see-through.
That's a good idea.
It was very clever.
That's a really good idea.
These effects still are just so incredible because sometimes it's a mix of CG and practical, which is amazing.
Yes, that's what you want, isn't it? Yeah,
that's the dream.
Yes.
The dream team.
And I love everything to do with Meryl's neck as well, and like we said earlier, there's some horrible kind of bone crunchingness to it, and it's brilliant.
Because first of all, it's twisted all the way round, and then it gets knocked all the way back, and then it gets knocked into the chest cavity, and then she's just having to hold it.
Yes.
I will not speak to you till you put your head on straight. They were all I had, and you took them away from me.
But also, brilliant physical comedy from Meryl Streep because she was doing that herself. When she's holding up her head and she forgets and lets go and it just flops.
Yes.
It's genius.
Yeah, she does an amazing job. She's actually a very good comedy actor, isn't she? Meryl
Which I
Streep.
think everyone knows that now.
Yeah.
But especially then. But also, I mean, the guys who, when I say guys, that's inclusive of all sexuality and gender, that made the CG. It was a company called Industrial Light and Magic, who the next year went on to work on a little project called Jurassic Park.
Yes, and I think it's George Lucas's.
Is that his?
Is that George Lucas's? I think he might have launched it with Star Wars.
But it was it was quite groundbreaking at the time.
And I think, like you said, there are a lot of 90s CGI has not aged well, I think. But funnily enough, Jurassic Park is obviously, I think, the one that has aged best out of any movie ever. But Death Becomes Her, you're right, it's aged really well. Maybe it's because it's cartoony as well. Maybe that helps, you know? It has a feel of like Roger Rabbit a little bit, you know?
It's totally that.
Which also holds up like perfect. Yeah. You know, absolutely flawless as well. So yeah, it's
a couple of crackers there, Zemeckis.
He really must have a lot of attention to detail with this kind of thing. You know, it must take a long time to work on. But what's great in comparison to, like we said, with Re-Animator, that this has got so much other fun stuff going on as well as the effects. The characters, the script, it's just really smart and witty.
There's never a dull moment.
There's never a dull moment. Yeah, that's
and
it.
Famously, there's a deleted alternate ending where he. Bruce Willis's character lives and has this lovely life with Tracy Ullman apparently somewhere, And I don't know, it's apparently no one's ever seen it, but audiences didn't like it, so they went back.
Yes, I think I have read that, and they actually had him as this old man.
Yeah.
The old man that you see in the picture at his funeral.
At the funeral, yeah. So, who's this wonderful explorer, had a full life.
Interesting. I always forget as well that actually that happened. Like, I thought he died when he was hanging from the roof.
When he falls through, but he goes into the pool.
Into the pool. It's so ridiculous, like a very shallow pool. I was like, you'd still be dead. Yeah. And obviously it's not a scary movie in any way, but I do like that it does feel like it is also paying homage to, again, classic horror, old Hollywood, like the big mansions, the thunder and lightning, gothic, everything's very gothic, like you say, and again it has a feeling of like, there are a couple of nods, aren't they, to like Frankenstein and that kind of thing, the kind of it's alive, and all of that kind of thing,
and the lightning and and Hammer, there's quite
Hammer, exactly. It feels like quite a love letter to horror at the same time, right?
And it's the that thing of but the flip side of this one is that he didn't create them, but they need him. And they'll do everything they can. They are the monsters, but he didn't create them. That's the flip of it, which I enjoy.
On guard, bitch.
Girls, let's just calm down. I'm sure we can settle this peacefully. And
you should learn not to compete with me. I always win. Ha! Ha! You may have always won, but you never played fair. Oh.
The roles of the male-female thing in this, I don't know how I feel about it, because initially I just go, oh, it's great. Two strong, overpowering women who get what they want and they'll stop at nothing to get it. Yeah. And then if you think about it too much, which I have, I start to go, but actually they are women who feel worthless and pointless unless they are young and beautiful.
Yes.
And they need this man. They need a man. They rely on a man to keep them that way. And then when he eventually leaves them, they literally fall apart.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's a bit like,
that's so true.
Actually, I don't know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think it is trying to deliberately play with that, and they need him, but they're quite upfront about the fact that is all they want him for. They don't want, because again, I was thinking about this as well, and when I watched it, I was a little bit like, oh, really, like when Goldie Hawn, loses all the weight, becomes beautiful, and then still wants him back, and I was like, but then actually rewatching it again, I was thinking, does she really? Is part of her plan to kill him or use him for his money in some way?
She wants to get rid of her first.
Yeah, exactly.
And then get his money or something.
Exactly, just get revenge.
She's exacting some sort of revenge.
Yeah. And I do like that he is this absolutely cartoonishly ridiculous, pathetic, weak character, isn't he? He is in no way a kind of likable or sympathetic character. You're rooting 100% for the women, right? Totally. And not him. That's the thing.
Even though technically at the end he's the hero, but to be honest, I love, you know what you asked me about the elixir, if I would have it.
Yeah.
I would, but then the rule about after 10 years you have to go into like solitary into hiding and the public can't see you. On your own, that would be rough, because what's the point in staying looking young? But if you had your frenemy and your mate, that would be really fun. So when they're the old hags at the back.
So good.
I absolutely love that, and that looks like the best fucking life.
Oh my god. Brilliant.
And because you could just do what you want, you keep falling apart, but you'll just piece each other back together.
Well, that's it. And it is, but it does give you that idea of like, oh my god, it would be like Bruce Willis said, he's like, it'd be so boring.
Yeah, and I'd watch everyone die.
I'd be so bored. Yeah, and it's so true. And you'd watch everyone die, and it's actually quite a dark, grim existence that they have at the end. And when they do fall apart, and there are just those body parts still alive, and it's like you literally cannot end it.
My legs aren't working. Help me! Do you remember where you parked the car?
I was going to ask you what's your favourite of these two movies. I think I know the answer.
Death Becomes
Amazing. And so finally then, before we wrap up, just zombies in general, what's your favourite zombie movie?
Return of the Living Dead 3.
I've never seen this.
Kidding me? I cannot tell you how many times I've seen it. I wore out my VHS when I was a kid. It's my absolute favourite one. So it's the third one, and it moves away from the comedy aspect of the first two. It takes that away, and it's a love story. It's so cool.
Amazing. Oh,
and then
we'll check
this
it out.
heartbreaking ending. Well, I won't tell you.
Yeah,
maybe,
don't tell me the
but
ending.
It's so heartbreaking and touching because
Oh.
she manages to remain just human enough to have love and empathy and stuff, but meanwhile has to kill and eat.
It's interesting because we talked about Return of the Living Dead, and obviously it is a funny comedy film, but also there is that element of like pain in it.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that these zombies just feel constant pain unless they're eating.
I listened to your episode.
Yeah, and that is a really interesting thing. It does have like quite these kind of dark elements running through it, which is good.
Yeah, it's actually directed by Brian Yunzer.
Oh right, oh cool.
Yeah, which I didn't know until I looked it up yesterday.
Interesting.
And I was
there
like,
we go.
shit, there you go.
All links up.
And that's all body horror in that as well.
And do you keep up to date with modern zombie stuff? I mean, are you still enough of a fan that like when the next new zombie film comes out, of which that seems to happen every week, will you be like, I want to see that, I'll go see that?
I lost interest.
Yeah.
I feel it's a bit overkill at the moment, for want of a better term.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it numbs me a bit when there's too much going on. It turns me off, I think. And at the moment we're having a bit of a sort of folk resurgence, I think, folk and occult, which
Definitely.
I'm excited for, seeing where that goes.
Totally.
More witchy stuff and
we're really much more in that kind of place right now, aren't
cult
we?
and occult.
Anyway, Stevie, thank you so much for
Mate.
joining me. It's been so much fun.
Thank you.
Where can people find you if they want to go find you online or anything like that?
At Mr. Stevie Webb on Twitter and Instagram.
Lovely.
But don't at me, Lovecraftians.
Yeah, don't. Be nice, be kind. Thank you very much. And that is it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a big thank you to my guests, Stevie Webb and, of course, the brilliant Barbara Crampton. So, what do you think of these two movies? Are you a fan of Re-Animator? Do you prefer From Beyond? What about Death Becomes Her? Do you think Death Becomes Her even belongs in a horror movie podcast conversation? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Letterboxd, on Instagram, and on Twitter. Don't forget, there is also a discussion group that's called the Evolution of Horror Discussion Group, and that's where you can chat about horror films, about the podcast, about anything you like with fellow listeners. You can find all other episodes and seasons of this podcast on our website. Just go to evolutionofhorror.com, and you can find this podcast on all major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Podbean, and various others. And if you get a chance, please do subscribe to us, spread the word about us, and leave us a little rating or review if you get a chance, preferably a nice positive one. It helps the podcast get discovered by new listeners. So, onwards and upwards then, what have we got next for you? Next week is going to be a particularly fun one. We're looking at two movies from a similar era, late 80s, early 90s, both pretty extreme, both pretty grotesque in very different ways. The main one we're going to be talking about is Peter Jackson's Brain Dead from 1992. Still a movie that has the reputation for being the goriest, the bloodiest, the squelchiest movie ever made. And then in the second half of the episode, I'm going to be joined by someone who's never been on the podcast before. She is an extreme horror lover. She writes about extreme cinema. She podcasts about extreme cinema. She tweets about extreme cinema. She's known online as Zobo with a shotgun. And she is going to be talking to me about one of her personal favourite exploitation extreme horror movies, Necromantic from 1987. Very, very exciting. Join us next week for all of this and more on the evolution of horror.